She'll replace you the moment you get soft. Nietzsche was right. Friedrich Nietzsche didn't write dating advice. He dissected human nature with a scalpel. And if he saw you today, begging her to stay, softening your voice to keep the peace, walking on eggshells just to be enough, he wouldn't call it love. He'd call it decay. Because Nietzsche understood that the moment a man sacrifices his strength to preserve comfort, he doesn't become more attractive. He becomes disposable. You thought vulnerability would bring her closer, but it only told her one thing: you are no longer the man who could walk away. And in that instant, she begins to drift, not always physically, but emotionally, internally, instinctively. Because what made her feel safe was never your softness. It was your center. And now, that center is crumbling. You were magnetic when you were focused. You were desirable when you were untouchable. When you didn't need her to validate your mood, your worth, your direction. But slowly, the polarity faded. You started giving more than you received. You explained yourself too much. You held back your truth to avoid tension. You lowered your edge to make her feel taller. And Nietzsche would say, you betrayed your own nature to preserve an illusion. Because nature doesn't respect weakness. It replaces it. And women, whether consciously or not, are tuned to this law. When your fire dims, her instincts sharpen. She might still smile, still touch you, still whisper, "I love you." But inside, she's already scouting your replacement, not to hurt you, but because her biology won't let her follow a man who no longer leads. Nietzsche believed that life itself is will to power, not comfort, not safety, not peace. And in relationships, that truth is even sharper. Because attraction doesn't come from agreement, it comes from polarity. From the tension between masculine direction and feminine chaos. But when you dull your edge, when you make her your therapist, your moral compass, your emotional regulator, you reverse the dynamic. She becomes the sun, and you orbit her. And Nietzsche would say, you've become reactive, not sovereign, controlled, not commanding. And the feminine instinct doesn't desire control. It desires a man it can't move so easily. A man who remains rooted even when storms come. That's why soft men don't lose women by accident. They lose them by design. Because every time you hesitate to speak your truth, every time you over-explain, every time you apologize for your masculinity, you signal that you are no longer dangerous. Not in a violent way, but in a spiritual way. You are no longer the storm she feels drawn to. You are the puddle she steps around. And Nietzsche warned, he who cannot command himself must obey. You may think you're being kind, but what you're really being is easily replaced. Women don't consciously plan to replace you when you get soft. It happens on a level deeper than language. You shift, and she feels it. Your presence weakens, your rhythm bends. The edge in your voice becomes a question instead of a direction. And her nervous system starts scanning, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct. Because the feminine doesn't just crave love, it craves containment. The moment she senses she is stronger than you emotionally, spiritually, or mentally, she begins to feel unsafe. And in that safety vacuum, her attraction dies, not all at once, but drip by drip, until she no longer looks at you with longing, just tolerance. Nietzsche wouldn't tell you to be aggressive, he'd tell you to be unshakable. This is where men make the fatal mistake. They try to win her back with more softness, more gifts, more openness, more approval. But Nietzsche would say, you're not loving her, you're submitting to her. And no woman wants to lead a man who's supposed to lead himself. You want her to choose you again? Then stop chasing her emotions and start rebuilding your structure. Not for her, but for yourself. Because the tragedy isn't that she left. The tragedy is that you abandoned the man she fell for long before she did. And in doing so, you gave her no choice but to leave. Nietzsche wasn't obsessed with dominance. He was obsessed comme autosufficientia. His ideal man didn't beg for affection or approval. He created meaning from within. But today, most men hand over their power in exchange for scraps of comfort. A text back, a breadcrumb of attention, a kiss that feels like mercy. And every time you do that, you teach her that her presence is worth more than your purpose. Nietzsche called this the morality of the slave. When a man lowers himself just to be accepted, you may think it's love, but it's dependence dressed as devotion. And the moment she senses you need her more than she needs you, the dynamic is broken. She may not even want to lose respect for you, but she will, because you made her your god. You built your mood around her availability. You traded your depth for comfort, your fire for validation. Nietzsche would ask, what else can she do now but walk away? She cannot worship what kneels. She cannot desire what clings. And once you've shrunk yourself to be loved, you'll spend the rest of the relationship wondering why she doesn't look at you the same anymore. This is the hidden danger of getting soft. It doesn't happen all at once. It's gradual. You let a few things slide. You stop holding your line. You apologize for things you didn't do just to keep the peace. You stop speaking directly, and soon your fire dims and you call it maturity. But Nietzsche would say that's not growth, it's submission. Real growth sharpens you. It strengthens your voice. It makes you clearer, not quieter. But you got softer, not stronger. And you hoped that softness would win her loyalty. Instead, it invited her doubt. Because the feminine doesn't crave a man who bends for her. She craves a man she can lean on without shaking him. A man whose love is fierce, not fragile. Who listens, but never loses himself. Who holds space, but never surrenders his spine. And if you can't give her that, she will subconsciously begin to test you, just to see if you're still solid. If you fail the test, she won't yell, she won't cry. She'll just slowly shift her energy, until one day you realize she's still in the room, but already gone. Nietzsche didn't believe men should chase love. He believed they should chase becoming. Because the man who becomes something rare, something disciplined, something magnetic, doesn't need to beg for love. It finds him. But when you become emotionally dependent, when you start adjusting who you are just to keep her comfortable, you stop being a man on a mission and start being her emotional pet. You may still call it love. You may still believe you're being romantic. But she senses it. The fire is gone. And the truth is, she can't desire a man she doesn't respect. That's the paradox most men refuse to accept. The more you chase her love, the less of it you receive. Because love, at its deepest level, is a response to presence, not performance, to gravity, to direction, to power held in silence. And Nietzsche warned, the man who lowers himself to be loved will eventually be hated, first by her, then by himself. You want her to choose you again? Then stop shrinking, stop pleasing, stop proving. Return to the man you were before you made her your reason for breathing. Because the one who replaces you won't be smarter, richer, or even better. He'll just have a spine. To Nietzsche, man's highest expression was not in obedience, but in overflow. In power that didn't ask permission. In love that wasn't based on fear. But you became cautious, careful. You began calculating every word so she wouldn't leave. You stopped being bold. You started managing her emotions instead of leading with your own clarity. And in that slow collapse, you traded your power for peace. But peace built on suppression isn't peace. It's paralysis. And women can feel that. They don't always know how to name it. But they feel it in your hesitation, in your tone, in your eyes. And when they do, the clock starts ticking. Because the feminine tests, not out of malice, but to feel your edges. To make sure you're still there, still present, still untamed, not reckless but sovereign. And when those edges disappear, when she realizes you're molding yourself to fit her expectations, something dies in her too. The pull, the polarity, the instinct to surrender. You've become safe, but not in the way she craves. Safe like routine, predictable, dull. Nietzsche knew, when the wildness of the masculine is tamed by fear of abandonment, the woman eventually abandons the tame. Not always for another man, but always for a deeper experience of life. You may think you're being emotionally intelligent, when in truth, you're being emotionally domesticated. You're no longer guided by inner vision, but by external approval. You avoid conflict not out of wisdom, but out of fear. You speak less truth, show less fire, and call it maturity. But Nietzsche would tell you, you haven't matured, you've conformed. And the man who conforms to stay loved will eventually lose both love and himself. Because the very fire that once made her drawn to you, the unpredictability, the edge, the mission, was extinguished by your desire to be kept. And when that fire goes out, she doesn't rage. She doesn't scream. She just slowly detaches. She begins to feel unseen, though you look at her constantly. Unheld, though you never stop touching her. Unheard, though you say everything she wants to hear, because what she really wants is a man who doesn't need her to define himself. A man who stands in his own light. Nietzsche would say, "The moment your identity requires her presence, your absence begins in her heart." You didn't lose her when she left. You lost her the moment you abandoned your edge. Nietzsche believed that man's tragedy is not in his suffering, but in how willingly he chooses it when it comes dressed as love. You thought you were sacrificing ego, but you were sacrificing self-respect. You thought you were being kind, but you were being compliant. You thought you were growing together, but you were shrinking alone. And deep down, you knew. You felt the shift. You felt your energy dim. You felt your mission blur, but you stayed anyway. You stayed because you thought love meant staying soft. Nietzsche would have called that self-betrayal under the mask of loyalty. And the cost? It wasn't just the loss of the woman. It was the loss of your fire, your edge, your ability to walk into a room and not care who approves. That's what she really wanted. To feel that your world wouldn't collapse if she pulled away. But you made her the center of your gravity, and she felt it, and she left. Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But if your why is her and only her, then you were never living. You were negotiating your existence through her gaze. And no woman can carry that weight without eventually dropping it." There's a point where a man must stop grieving her departure and start grieving his own. The version of himself he abandoned to keep her. The strength he muted. The direction he postponed. The truth he diluted just to avoid conflict. Nietzsche didn't see pain as the enemy. He saw it as the forge. And if you're feeling that pain now, the sting of being replaced, the ache of being forgotten, good. That means the man inside you is still alive. He's bruised, ashamed, quiet. But he's there. And he's ready to reclaim the throne you gave away the moment you called submission love. Because the man who walks away from her doesn't always win. But the man who walks back to himself never loses. She didn't replace you because you weren't enough. She replaced you because you forgot who you were when she met you. And now, Nietzsche would say, stand up, face the mirror, bear the weight, not to get her back, but to never lose yourself again. The next time you love, do it as a whole man. Do it without kneeling. Because if she leaves while you're standing tall, she's not your loss. She's just proof you refuse to shrink. Nietzsche never taught men to be cruel. He taught them to be unshakable. To hold their frame, to walk alone if needed, to speak truth even when it's inconvenient. Because in a world that worships comfort and emotional compliance, the man who stands in his power becomes rare. He becomes dangerous, not because he harms, but because he cannot be owned. And the feminine instinct recognizes this. It may resist it, it may test it, but ultimately, it respects it. And without respect, there can be no real desire. So let her leave, let her test, let her doubt. But do not collapse, do not beg, do not bend into someone you are not. Because Nietzsche would remind you, she may have replaced the version of you that got soft, but the man who stands tall again, who rebuilds, who rises, that man isn't chasing her anymore. He's chasing himself. And if she ever sees him again, it won't be as someone waiting to be chosen. It will be as the one who became the chooser. So the next time you feel her pulling away, don't panic. Pause. Watch. Ask yourself not what she needs from you, but what you're giving up to keep her near. Because no woman replaces a man who owns himself. She replaces the one who outsourced his identity to her attention. Nietzsche would say, "The fire of man is not sustained by being loved, but by becoming worthy of reverence even in solitude." Let her go. Let the silence return. And in that silence, rebuild the edge she forgot she once fell for. She'll replace you the moment you get soft. That's the law, not because she's heartless, but because the feminine doesn't follow what it pities. It follows what it feels pulled toward. You were never meant to shrink into safety. You were meant to stand in storm, in direction, in danger. Nietzsche wouldn't tell you to fight for her. He'd tell you to fight for yourself. Because if she ever returns, it won't be to the man she left. It'll be to the man she never thought you'd have the strength to become.